Hello, friends. It is September 29th, 2024, and this is Political Dharma with Alan Zundell. I've been talking about overcoming the two-party system, or at least making a crack in that big wall we're facing when it comes to our elections. And I've identified at least three ways we could make a difference. The first one being that some independent or minor party candidate gets enough of a share of the vote in the November presidential election to shake up the system and make the two parties worry about how they're losing voters and encourage voters to maybe move away from them to another candidate in future elections. So today I'm going to be following up on some of that. Now, early on, it looked like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was going to be a candidate who had the potential to make that kind of a difference as he was growing in the polls and getting on the ballot in state after state. But of course, as you know, eventually the mass media, the mainstream media started running hit pieces on him, and then the Democratic Party switched out Kamala Harris for Joe Biden as their nominee. And with that, Kennedy's campaign started to stall, and he eventually suspended it and then threw his support to Donald Trump. So today I'm going to have just a few follow-ups on Kennedy's attempts in the courts to get his name on or off the ballot in places where he thinks it would help or hurt Trump, and how the federal courts in particular are disposing of those cases, as we're already in the season where some states have begun voting, such as Virginia, South Dakota, and Minnesota, I believe. And in the coming weeks, there's going to be even more states. So the presidential campaign map is already pretty well, the outlines of it are pretty visible. So that it's not going to be Kennedy that breaks through here this year, I don't think, although he could still get a large share of the vote by people who are persistent voting for him where he is on the ballot. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about tying up some of his federal court cases, and also an article that purports to show where those Kennedy supporters are taking their votes. I don't think it's a very reliable article, but it is fodder for thought. And then finally, Kennedy's partnership with the Libertarian Party in fundraising, got a little bit to say about that. And moving on to some of the alternative candidates, what's happening in Jill Stein's attempts to get on the ballot, a new case where she's having problems with the Secretary of State in Ohio. And then the debate coming up between several of the minor party candidates. I'll be giving you some more information on that. And then moving into a discussion of the second way we might break through the two-party system, which is instituting different methods of voting. Now, among those different methods, probably the one that's best known right now is ranked choice voting, and the second runner-up would be so-called open primaries, by which they mean all the candidates running together in one primary rather than having each party do its own primary. So every candidate from every party running together, and then some number of them being promoted to the general election. Anyway, there's a bunch of combinations of those two systems in coming elections. In this election, there are initiatives in several states to do some combination of those. So I'm going to talk today more about ranked choice voting, explaining how it works and where it's present, and where people are going to be voting on it and stuff like that, as a start towards talking more about that in future episodes. And then finally, the third way that we might break through the two-party system is if the whole U.S. presidential political system collapses, which has in recent years become a possibility that I don't want to think a lot about, although it's hard not to face the fact that some things are terribly wrong in our system. So today, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be following up on some of the candidates who are not major party candidates for the presidency, and then some discussion of ranked choice voting. As we move forward, shifting more from the former to the latter. Let's start out with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his cases in the courts. How is it going for him? Well, in New York, he was trying to get on the ballot, and this is the one state where it looks like he wouldn't have gotten on the ballot. The Supreme Court decided not even to hear the case in New York. He's kicked off the ballot there, or at least prevented from getting on the ballot, even though he had enough signatures, because they said he listed his state of residence falsely. If you see here, the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, which was his final resort, it was only one sentence they gave. The application for writ of injunction presented to Justice Sotomayor and by her referred to the court is denied. Just one sentence. And this is the same as the court case that Jill Stein and the Green Party brought to the Supreme Court over her problems getting on the ballot in Nevada. Similar case. in that state laws are very complicated and it's easy to violate them, and these secretaries of state in those states make weird decisions. Anyway, same as that, the Supreme Court just gave one line denying even consideration, no explanation, anything like that. Now contrast that to how the Supreme Court handled Donald Trump's ballot access case way back earlier this year. They gave him a full hearing and decided in a way that advantaged his campaign, staying on the ballot in Colorado and other states that wanted to take him off the ballot because he had, in their eyes, engaged in an insurrection and thus disqualified himself from being a candidate for the presidency. Anyway, Supreme Court more solicitous of major party candidates, maybe even especially Donald Trump, than they are of independent candidates, of minor party candidates, who they just brush off in my eyes. And then another case in Michigan where Kennedy was trying to get off the ballot because he thought his presence might hurt Donald Trump's chances. In Michigan, the federal court there, the Sixth Circuit, ruled that he must remain on the ballot. Don't know if they're going to try to take this to the Supreme Court, but it's kind of late in the day for getting any of these decisions reversed. And in Wisconsin, similar thing, a swing state like Michigan, he's trying to get his name off the ballot. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court said that he's got to stay on the ballot. Now, they haven't taken that to the federal courts yet. I don't know if they're intending to do that. Actually, I don't know if they've already done that. I don't think they have. But in the state court system, they're at the end of that. So that's where Kennedy stands in that kind of stuff. He is not doing well in getting courts to buy his arguments, either taking him off or putting him on the ballot where he would like. And of course, it's hard for him to make some cases because his own decisions about this have thrown his ballot access into such confusion. So what else is happening with RFK? I mentioned this article. This is from Reuters. I should identify those earlier articles. One of them was, the first one about New York Supreme Court decision was from Politico, and then the other thing was the actual court decision. Wisconsin case was from the Associated Press, and then in Michigan, I don't remember where I got that from. Let me take another look at that one. It was from the Ballot Access News. Okay, so there was an article from Reuters, which was published in, I'm not sure where I saw it, U.S. News, I think, a website. I don't know anything about that otherwise, but they published this article, and here you can see the headline if you're watching the video. Some of RFK Jr.'s loyal fans are embracing Trump. Well, that's, number one, it's an understatement because most of RFK supporters in their own survey were supporting Trump, but they had very few voters they actually talked to. Let's look at this line from that same article. Reuters interviewed 11 Kennedy supporters. That's just 11 people out of the millions of people who are going to be voting in the United States. So I don't think you can rely on this report too much. You may have seen the report, so I want to flag that to you. And also flag the same reason I'm covering it is the reason they did, because people are curious about how those Kennedy supporters are going to vote. Here it says the 11 they talked to, 6 of them are going to vote for Trump, and there's 3 more who are considering voting for Trump, although they may still vote for Kennedy if he's on the ballot in their state, and then just 2 going over to other candidates, 1 for Jill Stein and 1 for Kamala Harris. So most of them either voting for Trump or considering voting for Trump. As they themselves admit, this is not statistically significant because it's such a small survey, doesn't really tell us much about the larger public. But down there in another paragraph, they're saying that right after Kennedy suspended his campaign and threw support to Trump, in Michigan, Trump got a 2 to 3% bump in support, and they think that could be due to Kennedy. Now, in swing states this year, it is so close that a couple of percentage points, one way or the other, could determine the outcome of the election in November, but it's hard to tell if that 2% bump was due to a statistical artifact, the margin of error, other things that may have happened to sway people's votes. So it's hard to tell if that had anything to do with Kennedy's endorsement. And going here forward, even if it had to do with that, there's so many things that could swing a vote 2 or 3 percentage points from one candidate to the other. It's hard to say that Kennedy is going to have much effect on that in the end. But at the end, at the last paragraph on the page, the video, if you're watching it, at the bottom of the screen. That's the word I'm looking for. Marquette Law School poll in Wisconsin, released a couple of weeks ago. 2/3 of would-be Kennedy voters, I like that phrase, would-be Kennedy voters in the state, made them sound like they're all washed up, right? Instead of this is their free decision what they're going to do. He's going to be on the ballot in Wisconsin. Anyway, 2/3 of them said they're going to back Trump if it were two-person race, which it's not going to be. There's going to be a bunch of other candidates on that ballot, including Kennedy, so we can't go by that either. But I think all in all, I would say that this is very plausible that this is how those Kennedy voters are going. Most of them opting to go over to Trump because that's what he asked them to do. And in some cases, they're not going to have any alternative of voting for RFK because he took himself off the ballot or didn't get on it in the first place. But I think a lot of them are going over to Trump, but there's a few who are not. At least from what I can tell from people's comments online, there's a few who are going over to Jill Stein. There's a few who may be voting for Harris. We don't know yet. So why did I even run that? I don't know, because I'm curious just like you are. I haven't learned a lot from that exercise. So I hope you forgive me for just doing something based on curiosity and debunking an article that purports to satisfy it. The Libertarian Party made an arrangement, the National Committee of the Libertarian Party made an arrangement with Kennedy a while back to do a joint fundraiser with him. This would advantage both of them because Kennedy can get larger donations through a political party than he can as an independent candidate. So if he partners with a party like the Libertarian Party, his donors can give more money. And the Libertarian Party receiving that money would split it, most of it going to Kennedy, but some of it going to their party to help them. But it's a little strange they're still doing this. This is from the Independent Political Report online. Kennedy Victory Fund goes to 12 participating committees, despite Kennedy's campaign suspension. So this is mostly state libertarian parties that are joining the effort, the joint fund, joining the joint, they're signing on to this joint fundraising effort with Kennedy and these parties because they want to raise money too. I think what's happening is that Kennedy is, even though he suspended his campaign, which is strange why they're still going through fundraising, or it would look strange, but number one, he may have campaign debts he still wants to pay off using this money. And number two, if there's any excess, he will probably give it to the Trump campaign since he's now supporting them. So that would be Kennedy's motives for staying in this joint fundraising agreement. And the Libertarian Party needs money, as I've seen in the Third Party Watch, mostly reports by George Phillips, I'm not sure how he pronounces his name. Anyway, he's been covering how the Libertarian Party is having financial problems, and there's a lot of dissension in the party about whether or not to actually support their own candidate, Chase Oliver, even though most of the ballots are going over to Oliver anyway. So don't want to get too deep into that, but here we see this fundraising agreement is still going on to help some of these libertarian parties in the states and the National Party, as well as the RFK and possibly Donald Trump coming out of this. So that's it for Kennedy this week. Just wanted to follow up on some of those things I reported on before. I'm not going to be reporting on everything Kennedy's doing. Like he had a rally this weekend, I think yesterday, Saturday, in Washington, D.C., a bunch of speakers talking about health. I'm not going to continue to cover him because it's mostly involving Trump's campaign, and my focus had been on the presidential election of how non-major party candidates were doing, not major party candidates. Let's look at Jill Stein now. Jill Stein, she's also having ballot access problems. In Ohio, this is a very messed up case, and I don't even know how to summarize it very accurately for you or clearly because it's not even clear in the stories coming out of this what's going on, but it looks like what happened. All right, it's common that a minor party candidate will put a stand-in vice presidential nominee on their papers to get on the ballot in a particular state. Now that's because states that require, this happened to Kennedy as well, states can require a vice presidential candidate to be on their paperwork, but then the candidate hasn't chosen a vice presidential candidate yet. In Jill Stein's case, she was going to wait until the Green Party convention was held and her nomination was secure before she chose a vice presidential running mate, which they did hold that convention, and then she did choose a running mate. So in these states where she had to file ahead of that event, she had to put in stand-in candidates. This is typical procedure for minor parties. that they will put in independent candidates as well. Ralph Nader has done it in the past when he was an independent candidate, not with the Green Party. Well, he did it with the Green Party as well. Anyway, they put in a stand-in vice presidential candidate for that paperwork, and then later on they can withdraw that candidate and put in a different candidate. In Ohio, she had a stand-in candidate, then somebody from the Green Party withdrew the vice president, and the Secretary of State interpreted that as a withdrawal of Jill Stein as well, because the deadline for switching out candidates or something had passed. Anyway, it did not seem like a fair move on the part of the Secretary of State of Ohio. Now Jill Stein has been taken off the ballot because of this. She is arguing that because the Green Party does not have a ballot line in Ohio, she's an independent candidate, and the Green Party cannot take her off the ballot. They were trying to take the vice presidential candidate off the ballot to put in the new one, her actual running mate. So that's what's happening there. She's having problems with the Secretary of State, just like it happens in a lot of states. It is not fair. Secretary of States are either Republicans or Democrats, and they're often biased against the third parties. All right, so on the topic of these other candidates, both Jill Stein and the Libertarian Party candidate, Chase Oliver, as well as the Constitution Party's nominee, Randall Terry, all of them have been confirmed for the Free and Equal Foundation's debate coming in October. So I reported this earlier from Ballot Access News, but the Free and Equal Foundation has now confirmed that their debate is going to be on October 23rd. That's a Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time in Los Angeles, and you can find it in a number of places. Same three candidates that appeared on their last debate this year. And if you see farther in that article, this is kind of interesting. Not only did they list some of the places you can find it on their website, on C-SPAN, on Rumble, and a couple other places. But look at that other highlighted passage if you're watching the video. They're going to have public voting open, and after the debate, to pick the winner through ranked choice voting. Now, I bring that up because ranked choice voting is the other way we could possibly break through the two-party system. Ranked choice voting or some other system of voting that allows people to show their preferences between candidates, or at least some kind of proportional system. There's a lot of different systems that you could consider, but ranked choice voting is one of the leading ones. So if you want to have the experience of using ranked choice voting to vote, you can go watch the debate and then afterward use their online app to vote between those three debaters. There might be others added at the last minute. These are the three that have been confirmed, that have confirmed they're going to show up. I don't know why Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz are not responding to these invitations. You would think they would want the exposure. But you can use ranked choice voting to see how that works. So where am I going from here? I really love to say that word so. I notice when I'm editing these videos, I'm saying so all the time. Even more than I say I think. I was about to say it once again. We will turn now to a discussion of ranked choice voting. There, as I said, there's a number of voting method reforms going on, including what is sometimes called, I think inaccurately, open primaries. Not going to talk about that a lot today. Ranked choice voting, which I will talk about, explain how it works, but also approval voting, which is now being used in one city, St. Louis, and then star voting, which has had a number of initiatives in Oregon and attempts in other places to get initiatives off the ground. And we will turn to talking about ranked choice voting. They're going to use it in that debate, as I said, and ranked choice voting is being used in a bunch of places across the United States. This is from the website of Fair Vote, which is the leading organization promoting ranked choice voting and actually working against other types of voting method reforms, which I don't think is a good idea on their part, and I don't know why. I don't know where their funding is coming from. They seem to have a lot of money, not only to promote ranked choice voting, but to try to kill other voting reform methods. But it shows here there's a lot of cities and counties across the United States that are currently using ranked choice voting, and a couple of states, Alaska and Maine, which will be using ranked choice voting in this presidential election. Now, you also see a bunch of states shaded in blue. That doesn't mean the state is using them for the whole election. It just means overseas voters they allow. They send out the ballots to them earlier for overseas voters, including military stationed abroad. And they do that because there may be candidates who drop out before they have their actual in-person voting. So when they send out these early ballots, so overseas voters can fill out the ballot and send it back. Maybe their candidate they chose had been replaced. So they can use ranked choice voting to show their other preferences, but they only use it for overseas voters. The two states that currently use it statewide is Alaska and Maine. And let's take a look at an actual ballot so you can see how ranked choice voting ballots would work. This is from Alaska, a copy of their actual ballot. You see on the left-hand column, they have listed the various candidates, both the presidential and vice presidential candidates. So the first one being Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the Democrats. After that, Robert F. Kennedy, then Chase Oliver, the Libertarian Party, Peter Sonsky of the American Solidarity Party, Jill Stein of the Green Party, Randall Terry of the Constitution Party, Donald Trump of the Republican Party, and then Cornel West, independent candidate. Actually, he's in Alaska, he's with the Aurora Party of Alaska. So they list out the candidates as usual, but then on the right, instead of just picking one, they have multiple columns that say first choice, then second choice, then the next column is third choice, and then fourth choice, and fifth choice, sixth choice, seventh choice, eighth choice, so you can rank each of the candidates. Now, I've highlighted an important instruction to know, which is fill out no more than one oval for each candidate or column. You cannot choose two candidates for one rank. That is, you can't say, my first choice is both Chase Oliver and Robert Kennedy. You have to rank them, one at a different ranking than the other. You can't give two people equal rankings, and you cannot use different rankings for the same candidate. Suppose you say Donald Trump is my first choice, my second choice, and my third choice because I love him so much. You can't do that. Either of those things will invalidate your ballot. So that is one hang-up with these types of ranked choice voting ballots, is it's hard for voters not to make a mistake on it and have their ballot invalidated because they might accidentally, or maybe not knowing that it's going to invalidate their ballot, put two candidates in the same row or put two ranks for the same candidate. That's what a ballot looks like, and that's how you're supposed to fill it out. You can do as many, in Alaska, you can do as many or as few candidates as you want. You can only, say this is my first choice. I don't want to even consider the others. Or you can fill out all 8 of them or anywhere in between. Now, how do they count those? Well, here's a graphic from the Ranked Choice Voting Facts website, and it's the best one I found in a quick look online. So step 1, the voters fill out their ballots, indicating their first, second, third, etc. choices. Step 2 is in counting the ballots, they count only the first choice votes on each ballot and determine whether or not there is a majority winner. So a majority means not just the most votes, but 50% plus 1 votes at a minimum. In this example, they have 3 candidates, one with the black bar representing 25% of the first choice votes, and a blue bar representing another candidate, looks like a female candidate, with 40% of the votes, and then another one with a red bar showing 35% of the votes. None of those candidates got a majority, that is 50% plus 1, so there's no winner. If there had been a majority winner, that candidate would have won the election, and there would be no further counting. At that point, it's decided, and there's nothing else to be done. But if nobody gets a majority, step number 3 there shows that the candidate who got the fewest first choice votes is eliminated from the competition, and their votes, their first choice votes, then go to each of those voters' next candidate choice, so their second choice. So if your first choice was eliminated in the first round, your vote then is transferred to your second choice candidate. And here, because there's only 3 candidates, that elimination of the first place candidate is bound to come up with a majority winner, and that blue striped candidate got 60% of the vote, including a good chunk of the eliminated candidate's vote, brought her up above 50%, and only a few of them went to the other candidate, which would be typical because you would think that a particular candidate's voters would have a similar second choice, because there have to be some connection between the positions of those 2 candidates in order for them to want to go to that candidate. All right, so it keeps going on. If there's 8 candidates, as there is in Alaska for president, then it might go on for round after round, trying to get a candidate to 50%, which actually doesn't happen that often in high-profile cases. In the case of Maine, They were the first state to have a presidential election. They passed an initiative to bring ranked choice voting to statewide races, including the presidential race. They passed that in 2016. And then in 2020, that presidential election, they used ranked choice voting. Here you see that in the first round of counting, Joe Biden got 53% of the vote, so there was no further counting necessary, and that often happens because the two major parties are still the ones that attract the most votes, either because voters are in the habit of doing it or because they really do prefer those two and haven't really given much consideration to the others yet or considered them and rejected them. But because Joe Biden got more than half the statewide vote, he got 2 electoral votes from Maine for in that ranked choice voting round. Maine is also unusual in that they divide up their electoral votes, 2 of them going to the statewide winner, 1 each going to the winner in one or the other of their congressional districts. They have just 2 congressional districts, so the presidential candidate who got the most votes in one district was Joe Biden, got more than half, and added that 1 electoral vote to his 2 statewide electoral votes. And then Donald Trump got the other congressional district, which is more rural, came in first there, had more than half, and so he won 1 electoral vote there. But that's not the usual pattern in ranked choice voting. It's just Maine has long been unusual, along with Nebraska, in splitting up their electoral votes. So it often happens that the first choice decides it. Okay, so that is ranked choice voting. Let me get back to my face if I can find it. That's how you fill out your ballot. You rank the candidates, as many as you want, and then when they start to count them, in the first round, they only count the first choice of each voter. If they don't get if no candidate gets a majority, then they eliminate the candidate who got the fewest first choice votes, redistribute their votes, recount, and either there's a winner or they go eliminate the one who got the fewest votes and redistribute theirs, and so on and so forth. So there could either be only 1 round, which is often the case, or there could be multiple rounds, which is hard to display and explain to voters exactly what happened in all the redistribution. They have to have faith in the process in order for that to be acceptable, I suppose, and I would certainly want to know. So there's going to be measures on ballots in various states this year to ask voters if they want to institute ranked choice voting, either with or without some type of open primary, which I'm not going to go into today because that's a whole nother conversation. But let's see, we have Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, and Washington, D.C., each determining in this election whether or not they want to use ranked choice voting in combination with open primaries for future elections. And in Oregon, the state I recently moved from, they have a measure on the ballot to bring ranked choice voting to all their statewide elections, but it's not in combination with any change in the primary system. The parties would still choose their candidates, and then they would all run against each other in the general election using ranked choice voting to determine the winner if that passes in Oregon. Now, Alaska, I should add that they have an open primary system with most of their candidates using ranked choice voting in the general election, but not for the presidential election. In the presidential election, each party has its own nominee. They go to the general election, and that's why they had those 8 rankings instead of, as in most cases, they have only about 4 ranks. I think it's 4, maybe 5. I'm pretty sure it's 4. So there's going to be ranked choice voting ballot measures. I'm going to be talking about all this stuff a little more as we go on because the shape of the candidates and the ballots they're on is already pretty well set for the election. The Libertarian Party is going to be on almost all the ballots across the United States. I think only 3 states where they have failed to get on the ballot, 3 or 4. The Green Party is about 2/3 of them. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is still on the ballot in a majority of states. Not more than, I think, 32 to 36%. I forget exactly how many, or 32 to 36 states, whatever the percentage is. So he's going to be on most of the ballots. The other candidates, not that many states, a 4th or a 3rd or less. So it doesn't look like there's going to be a big vote for non-major party candidates this year. Still, you don't know until it happens. Some Kennedy supporters may still vote for him. And Jill Stein may pick up a lot more Chase Oliver, the Libertarian Party, might pick up a lot of votes. So their combined vote might actually cause a shakeup in the two-party system by encouraging voters to consider other candidates, independents and minor party, or by inducing the two major parties to consider changing their messaging, or as they usually do, if there's a challenge to the two-party system, double down on attacking the minor party candidates and trying to knock them off the ballot, which is not healthy, but more and more people become aware of it, the more and more people are losing confidence in our electoral system overall, which is raising that third possibility that people may just decide to do away with the whole system one way or another through violence or not. One last thing, if you want to have some experience trying out these different systems of balloting, yesterday I attended an online symposium sponsored by the Equal Vote Coalition, which discussed all these voting reform methods and had a bunch of activists and researchers talking about the various voting systems and how the campaigns to get different methods instituted were going on. They do have online a opportunity for you to get online and try out these different voting methods. You go to bettervoting.com/Pres24. The Pres stands for President, Presidential Election 2024. Again, that's bettervoting.com/Pres, P-R-E-S, 24. You can click on their vote button and vote in 4 different ways among the presidential candidates, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who they've included. You can use the standard plurality method that we now have, where you can pick only one candidate and the candidate with the most votes wins. You can use approval voting, where you can pick as many candidates as you like and give them a vote. Or you can use ranked choice voting and rank the various candidates. Or you can use star voting, where you give scores to the different candidates, and then there's a process of determining the winner. And you can also click on that little place where it says view results and see how the different methods have come up with their different winners. Now, I looked this morning, only 45 people had voted so far, so this is not like representative of the entire population at all. But in 3 of the different voting methods, Kamala Harris had won, and in one of them, Jill Stein of the Green Party won. So there are differences in voting methods and how they determine the winner, and there's considerations to be made about which one is preferable to the other, which I'll get into in the future. It could be just that it was such a small sample of voters that 1 or 2 voters who had unusual choices, like they looked at Kamala and Jill Stein equally or something like that, why it would have this result different for ranked choice voting than the rest of the voting methods. But as more and more voters check in and do this, we should get a better picture of how these different voting systems work with larger populations of voters. Just a flavor of it for those of you who want to check it out. That is it for this week. I once again thank you for staying with me and listening to me. I am trying to branch out into different types of videos as this presidential election draws to a close. Many of them will be about voting methods. Some of them will be about other things. I did do an interview with a woman who wrote a book that I thought was interesting from the standpoint of showing how people actually make political decisions based on their identity and the values that are intertwined with that identity, although she took the interview in the direction of criticizing Donald Trump and encouraging people to vote for Kamala Harris, at least by implication. So it wasn't my intention to disparage Trump or promote Harris. I would disparage both of them equally, but in different ways. I'm going to vote for a different candidate other than a major party candidate, as you may have gleaned from my whole purpose in doing these. Anyway, I'll be talking about different things at different times. Some may interest you, some may not, but thank you for those of you who are sticking with me and liking, commenting. I really read all the comments. I get a lot out of them, either to challenge some of my assumptions or give me new information, or just for you to vent and say what you're thinking, because that's interesting to me as well. If you want to help donate to keep this channel going, you can go to my website, politicaldharma.com, and make a one-time donation. If you can give a continuing donation, I only have two choices, $5 a month or even less, I think, like $2.50 or $3, because I don't want to, have you overextend yourself. You can go there, patreon.com/politicaldharma, and if you do that, become a member of my Patreon community, you will be getting these episodes early, sometimes only half an hour or so early, sometimes longer depending on when I get them done and when I want them to show up online. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it, and we'll be talking about how the presidential election comes out in just about a month and trying to interpret how that bodes for the future. Bye.